Good evening and welcome. Tonight we have something different than you might be used to hearing in our performance hall. It's a lecture recital, which is both a concert performance and a lecture by me. If you haven't had the opportunity to meet me yet, I'm Dr. Von Rosti, who is the Director of Choral Studies here at Indiana University, Purdue University. So tonight is our practice run, and we welcome you here for being our audience for our guinea pig. A lecture recital such as this is both a recital and a lecture, so the context for this is perhaps a little less formal than you might be used to in concerts. We could have questions presented at a lecture, but we might request that you save those for the end. The choir doesn't like it necessarily when they get interrupted in the middle of singing, even when I do it, so we'll hold off the questions on the end. The Choral Public Domain Library, or CPDL henceforth, was founded in 1998 as a way of easily sharing music scores online which are no longer under copyright. It became a choral wiki in 2005 and a 5013C tax-exempt charitable organization in 2010. At last count, there were almost 22,000 scores available by over 2,500 different composers. CPDL thus represents a wealth of free music, all of which is readily available and freely reproducible. As schools at all levels battle budgetary constraints, a free resource such as CPDL represents a treasure trove of easily replaceable and conveniently stored repertoire. The digital storage advantage cannot be underestimated either, as scores are easily searchable online. Just as personal DVD movie collections already look dated, choral libraries full of 70 copies each of 1,000 titles of old music are no longer entirely necessary. I consider CPDL to be one of the biggest ways in which choral music has changed and will change during our lifetimes. While CPDL permits easy access, the sheer volume of possibilities can be overwhelming. In an attempt to make certain CPDL compositions more familiar, this recital will present largely unknown but accessible works from every era of music history appropriate for mixed choirs of various sizes at high school, college, community, and church institutions. The impetus for this presentation came when I was adjudicating at a high school choral event, and 3 consecutive high school groups, perfectly coincidentally, chose to perform Sicut Cervus by Palestrina. There is no question that Sicut Cervus is Palestrina's best-known anthem, but surely such a great composer wrote other great works as well. And how might we be sure that Sicut Cervus is the best work by Palestrina if we are familiar with just that one? I was thus inspired to explore beyond the tried and true and see if CPDL holds any other further choral gems which are less well-known but no less deserving of performance. The following presentation was the result. For the sake of time, instead of 22,000 compositions, I've narrowed down to only 3 per musicological era, beginning with the Renaissance. Let's begin with the Renaissance. The birth date for Pierre Certain was unknown, but from an incident recorded in 1530, we know that he was still young then. Apparently, the young Certain was not only playing ball outside Notre-Dame Cathedral during a service, but also refused to attend that service. Both of these were irreverencies, which would have resulted in imprisonment had he not been underage at that time. Certain's most famous composition is entitled Je ne l'ose dire, which is a rhythmically lively work often done in high schools. But I wanted to see what else Certain had done, so I was playing through all of Certain's chansons as part of a project in graduate school. I mean, that's how many of us spend our Friday nights, right? Sight reading through 16th century scores? We've all been there. Work with me on this. Just nod your head. This one stood out for me for 2 reasons. The 16th notes in the second bar of the alto part are extremely rare in the music of the period. And in the 4th bar, the basses provide what would later be called a deceptive cadence, also highly irregular in Renaissance music. Now, to be clear, Certain did not think in terms of deceptive cadences. We only hear it that way in retrospect. His approach to composition would have been more horizontal than vertical. Yet this composition holds some interesting dissonances and unexpected meter changes that, in my opinion, distinguish it from the rest of Certain's work and even make it stand out amongst the other chansons of the era. We're about to perform my edition of Certan's composition, which, because I found it from the original manuscripts, there is no proof that this piece has ever been performed in the past 450 years. We'll follow this immediately with Palestrina's Ave Maria, the words spoken to Mary by the angel Gabriel as he was announcing to her that she would bear a child, as recorded in the first chapter of the Gospel of Luke. The astute will notice here on the screen that this is not the same Ave Maria as is recited today by Catholics. This is because that form, which ends with "now and in the hour of our death," was not fixed by the Catholic Church until 1555, which is after the time of the composition of this piece. To conclude our set of 3 pieces from the Renaissance era, I've selected an easy 4-part anthem by Wilkes. Imitative entrances commenced by the basses provide polyphonic variety to this mostly homophonic setting, but its straightforward nature renders it accessible for even smaller church choirs. We'll follow this up with Alleluia by Purcell, another 4-part anthem to commence the Baroque period. A steady lilt characterizes each of the 8 4-bar phrases that comprise this score. Both of these are pieces of music that you can program with any church choir. Just about everybody has heard of Johann Sebastian Bach, and we know that he came from one of the most musical families in Germany at the time, but not everyone has heard of Johann Ludwig Bach. And by the way, it was a family tradition that every male was given the first name Johann, so we tend to refer to the Bachs by their second names. Ludwig was born 8 years before Sebastian, his second cousin, but arguably was even more famous during his lifetime. Sebastian admired the work of Ludwig and copied out some of his cantatas. In fact, at least one of his cantatas, once thought to be written by Sebastian, has since been proved to instead be by Ludwig. So the musical influence here is quite strong, lest anyone think that the genius of Sebastian Bach spontaneously erupted out of nowhere. Listen for the exuberant melismas, the syncopated hemiolas in the middle section in compound meter, and how both choirs come together in the recapitulation. Here, in Ludwig's motet for double choir, the choirs sing antiphonally back and forth the words of Psalm 73, verse 28, which resound, "This is my joy."
Meine Freude,
To conclude the Baroque era, I've selected a chorus from Handel's oratorio Samson, which was the first oratorio that Handel wrote after the successful premiere of Messiah in 1742. Everyone has heard of the Hallelujah chorus, and this piece sounds strikingly familiar, with long-held notes sustained in one voice while the others cadence around it. Fugal entrances in the second half provide a textural contrast with the predominantly homophonic opening, just like the Hallelujah chorus. This excerpt comes as the final chorus to Act 2, where the Philistines praise their god Dagon. Now, this is historical European music, not world or ethnic music, so let's be clear that while we don't know exactly how the songs that pre-biblical cultures would have sounded, scholars remain nonetheless convinced that the Philistines did not sing in four-part fugal melismatic counterpoint. The three selections from the classic period are all relatively short. You've heard of Jean-Jacques Rousseau before, but you've likely never seen his name on a choral program. Rousseau is more famous for being the political philosopher whose ideas influenced the Enlightenment and ultimately the French Revolution. As an aside, did you know that Anthony Burgess, the author of A Clockwork Orange, also composed choral works? Personally, I've been tempted to entitle a concert "Compositions by People Who Never Should Have Been Composing." But not only do I not really want to conduct such a concert, I'm sure I would get sued by someone. Rousseau's brief work here is a simple lullaby sung to a baby. The Mozart that follows it is fascinating for two reasons. Firstly, it is Mozart's only known setting of a text in English, written while he was being traipsed around Europe by his father Leopold. Secondly, it is Mozart's earliest surviving vocal piece, composed when he was only 9 years old. As such, it only shows his nascent style and reflects the type of music that Mozart was studying at the time, that of earlier eras. We conclude this set with a selection from Beethoven, who in my opinion tends to be underrepresented in choral programming. I mean, sure, conducting the Ninth Symphony or the Mass in C can represent a pinnacle achievement for those of us who have that opportunity. But what about those of us who do not have easy access to an orchestra for accompaniment? Beethoven is well represented in instrumental and chamber programming, yet choral students rarely encounter his name outside the history textbooks. Here is an accessible motet by Beethoven that could be sung by a small church choir or high school ensemble. But first, two short works by Rousseau and Mozart.
Hush, my babe, lie still and slumber. Holy angels guard thy bed. Heavenly blessings without number, gently falling on thy head. How much better thou art attended than the Son of God could be, when from heaven he descended, and became a child like thee. God is our refuge, God is our refuge, God is our refuge, God is our refuge and strength, perfectly present help, a present help in trouble.
Felix Mendelssohn is one of the most popular composers of the Romantic era, but many of us conductors can go our entire lives without having the opportunity to conduct either of his celebrated oratorios, Elijah and St. Paul. This next piece is a short and accessible work for double choir that would be appropriate in either liturgical or concert settings. One of 3 self-standing Kyries that Mendelssohn composed, this one comes from Die Deutsche Liturgie, which was written for the cathedral in Berlin and was only published posthumously. To conclude the Romantic era, I've selected 2 relatively obscure pieces by 2 very well-known composers, and we'll perform them together. Robert Purcell is an English composer who spent most of his life living in continental Europe, first in Germany, then in Switzerland. Largely self-taught, he wrote what he called madrigals in 8 parts, the best of which is surely Lea Garland, which is also known in its reworked sacred version called Tu es Petrus. This next piece we're about to perform is Great God of Love, which is also similar, particularly because it's also written for 8 parts. It also remains in the same key. It also divides fairly evenly in half and also presents a brief text. The Austrian composer Anton Bruckner is most famous for his romantic motets such as Locus Iste, Ave Maria, and Os Justi. But before those massive staples of the romantic choral repertoire, he wrote this, Pange Lingua, which dates from 1835, when Bruckner was just 11 years old.
Amen.
In the modern era, we run into copyright issues. Typically, a composer must have passed away 75 years ago or more before their work enters the public domain, and that assumes that copyrights have not been renewed by their estate. The English composer Herbert Howells, who just died in 1983, has only one piece available on CPDL, but luckily it's a good one. One should also note that this piece, due to copyright laws being different from country to country, is only in the public domain in the United States. As it discusses the arrival of the three wise men paying homage to the infant Jesus, Here is the Little Door might be most commonly performed at Christmas, but it is also appropriate in Epiphany. Other modern composers might choose to use CPDL to disseminate their music to reach a wider audience, and our last two composers might fall into this category. Abdel Di Marco is an Argentinian priest who later relocated to Puerto Rico. He not only edited the Palestrina piece that we heard 35 minutes ago, but he also composed this Lux Aeterna in memory of the victims of the terrorist attacks of September the 11th, 2001. One can guess what the falling motif in the piano's opening bars might symbolize. We will conclude with a Gloria written by Peter Bird, who is a retired geophysicist from Los Angeles. He's got an interesting catalog of choral publications, including some titles we might be familiar with, such as a Magnificat and Nunc Dimittis, and some titles that might be unique to him, such as Hubble Ascending, and 4 pieces inspired by the Mars rover, which is the only choral pieces that I know that include the text that the Mars rover sent back to Earth, including the lines scan, triangulate, navigate, roll, 6, 7, 8, 5, 4, 3, 1, beginning analysis now. His Gloria, however, is an exuberant through-composed setting of the traditional Latin text from the opening lines of the second movement of the Ordinary of the Mass. He told me by email that this was the first piece he ever composed, selecting this text out of inspiration from a phrase he learned in Sunday school: "If you begin by praising God, all things will turn out well." As far as the composer is aware, our performance tonight represents the Midwestern premiere of this piece.